Hello everybody, this is Cap here, and I would like to welcome you to the 36th video in my Beginner C++ tutorial series. In this video, we are going to be talking about namespaces. Now, as you can see, I have a little bit of code written here, and this actually shouldn't work. And you guys may not know why just yet, since we haven't gone over namespaces. But we will get into that in a minute. So, namespaces are really just a tool that you can use to prevent, names clashing together, like having two classes with the same name and then it being ambiguous. So, usually what you'll want to do is you'll want to group related classes into the same namespace. Like, for instance, the standard library has its own namespace, which is std, which is why we, like for instance here, using namespace std. So, for instance, if we had a lot of classes that had to do with polymorphism, we could have a namespace called namespace p for polymorphism, and then put all of our classes and definitions that have to do with polymorphism inside this namespace, including the implementations. And you can just do that like so. So now, if we come back to our main here, and as you can see, we've included poly h, and just try to say poly, p, it's not going to work because it doesn't know what you're talking about. So what's happened here? Last time we tried it worked. Well, that's because the last time we tried it, poly was in the public namespace. And if you don't put something in a namespace, it will be in the public namespace. So now that we've given or put poly in its namespace p, it is now no longer a part of the public namespace or global namespace. Sorry. So in order to use it, we have to do one of three things. We either have to say using namespace p, like we usually do with the standard library using namespace std, since everything in the standard library is in the std namespace. Or we can also just say using p scope operator poly, which will. And the difference between the two of these is when we say using namespace p, it's like suppose we had 20 classes that were in the p namespace that had to do with polymorphism. When we say using namespace p, we would bring all of those classes into the global namespace. But if we just say using p scope operator poly, all we're doing is bringing poly into the global namespace. So it's a lot cleaner. It's a much cleaner way of doing it. But if you want to be even safer and ensure that you will have no name collisions, you can just say p scope operator poly in here. So we are telling it directly where to go find it and not really bringing it into the global namespace. Like, for instance, if we try to do poly j down here, as you can see, it doesn't. It's like, what's poly? Because we didn't really bring poly into the global namespace, we just told it where to go find it here. So that's the safest way of doing it, but it's also the most tedious way of doing it. So, going back to what I was originally saying, some of you may have caught on by now to why this shouldn't be working. It's because string and cout and indel are part of the standard library. And as you may have noticed, we haven't included, or well, we haven't said using namespace std or, using std cout, indel, and string, or any of that. And we haven't prefixed them with the std and then the scope operator. Well, the reason it's working is because when I do these videos, sometimes I do things, that aren't really considered good practice in order to speed things up. Like I leave, class variables public and that sort of stuff. Well, this here is a big one, so you guys should probably pay attention. Really, you should never put using namespace anything in a header file. That's because not only are we bringing it, into, the public namespace here, or the global namespace here, it will apply here as well, because we are including it here. And that is not a good thing. Really, you want to be safe when you're using header files. And the safest thing we can do is std and just prefix it with std in the scope operator. Because if we were to say, using std string and using std cout and using std indel, guess what? It still brings it into our namespace out here. And we don't want that. So really, the safest way to do it is just to go through in your header files and prefix all of them with their proper namespaces in the scope operator. Now, people will debate this, from sun up to sundown, but that's just my opinion. But in the CPP files, it's a bit of a different story. Because it would be, perfectly fine to have using namespace std here because it is not getting included. See? So that's a bit different. It's still kind of overkill, and most, including myself, would advise against it. And instead, I would just go with using std string, using std cout, using std indel, and that way you don't have to prefix every one with std, but yet you're still keeping what you're bringing into this namespace from the other namespace at a minimum. So that's, I know it may seem a little strange, but if you start to use namespaces a little and get into the groove of it, it's really a powerful thing. And let's see here. Well, this is an implementation file, so we can just say using string, using std cout, and using std indel. And I think that was pretty much all I really wanted to cover in this video. I would encourage you all to I would encourage you all to go out and do your own research on namespaces. This is just kind of a starting point. There's a lot more you can do with namespaces, like nested namespaces, namespace aliasing. Those would be two things I would encourage you guys to look up. And, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Just remember that you have to include both your declarations and definitions in your namespaces. Because if we take this out, it's going to complain hideously because it can't see poly. If we did that, as you can see, because we went into the namespace and used the scope operator, it would work. But that would be, tedious. You could also, do the whole using namespace thing here, and it wouldn't really, have many adverse effects. But if you do it with, using namespace P, it'll work, but something to be aware of is I do not believe that anything new that you declare in here will be included in the namespace. But I'm pretty sure if you don't include anything new, it'll work just fine. Poly P dot 1 equals 12 and cout yeah. So, I personally like just doing it this way, just to be sure I get everything in the namespace that I want to get into the namespace. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover in this video. This video was a little bit longer than the past few, but we covered a lot. If you didn't catch everything, you can go through, and I would encourage you to watch it again. But if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you've watched a few of my videos and really like them, go ahead and subscribe so you can see when I post new ones. And I would like to thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.